In this video, we'll learn how colonial people could construct all of the different buildings they would need for their farm. They would use a technique called timber framing, in which heavy pieces of wood, or timbers, would be used to frame the structure they wanted to build. Our example today will be building a Dutch colonial barn. Or perhaps I should say that we'll be building a scale model of the Dutch colonial barn. The process, techniques, and pieces that we use to build our model will be exactly like the real thing, just shrunk down to a more manageable size. So here we are inside of our barn where we'll be constructing the miniature barn, and you can already see we have most of our foundation set up. Any good building starts with a strong foundation. Here you see what we call floor sills. These sills will set the shape and size of our barn. All the rest of the structure will insert into these pieces of wood. This building style uses what is known as mortise and tenon architecture. A mortise is a hole carved into the timber. The tenon is a precisely carved end of another timber which will insert into the mortise. These two pieces are precisely carved to go together, and they create an incredibly strong joint. Think of it like a giant three-dimensional puzzle with different pieces that are meant to go together. We will construct this entire barn using the mortise and tenon technique. And just like that, our foundation is complete, but we're only just getting started. Here we have the pieces for our first H-frame. H-frames are the defining characteristic of Dutch colonial buildings. They are the central support structures which hold up the weight of the roof and the walls and basically the entire building. In our barn, you can see the H-frames right here, with two heavy posts going up and one large anchor beam going across the middle. To support the incredible weight of that central anchor beam, we have these diagonal pieces which we call braces. So to construct this H-frame, all we have to do is slide the pieces that go together to form the mortise and tenon joints. But here's the thing, if all of these pieces can slide together, they can just as easily slide apart. So we need some way to lock these mortise and tenon joints together. We could use nails, but nails this size would be incredibly expensive. For colonial builders, wooden pegs would do just as well. Here you can see the pegs and wedges that hold the real barn together. You must imagine the incredible amount of strain and weight placed on these simple pegs. But they will hold strong for centuries. Now that we have our first H-frame constructed, we can raise it up. The whole thing will insert into little mortises drilled on the floor sills. Now, before going any further, we should probably add in the floorboards. Alright, so this is a floorboard, nice and smooth and polished. We have a tapered end right here, and we have a flat end right here. And we have a tapered end right here, and a flat end right there. So what we can do is we can take the tapered goes with the taper, and we insert it like this. and we can just fast forward as we do the rest of the floorboards. Nice and secure. Using the skills that we've learned, we can now go through and complete all the rest of the H-frames. This barn model will have 4 H-frames in total. As we raise each frame, we connect them with what are called girts. The girts connect each frame so that they can all support each other. And with that out of the way, it really is quite simple to just set up the rest of the H-frames. With all the H-frames raised up, we can now add a purlin plate on top of the structure. The purlin plate also helps to keep the H-frames together, but more importantly, will hold up the roof. The roof will be made of more heavy timbers, so we add more diagonal bracing for extra support. Compare what we've built with the actual barn itself. In this photo from 2001, where we had to do some major repair work to our barn. As you can see, we are done with the central H-frames, but we still have more work to do. So we are now working on the sides or the wings of the barn, right? We've already done the central structure. To make the wings, we'll use a similar process. We'll need some posts, like these posts right here. Well, on the little version, our barn will have these posts right here. So these will go up and down. Now to connect that to the rest of the structure, or the central structure, we'll have beams connecting that outer frame to the inner frame. Using the techniques we learned to build the central H-frames, building these side frames is relatively simple. The vertical posts are inserted into small mortises, and horizontal beams join those posts directly to the H-frame. These pieces will also help to hold up the roof, so we will add a purlin plate on top, which will also get extra bracing, just like we did in the center. We are almost done with our barn, but we still need to add the roof. The roof could be the trickiest part of construction. It would need to be built at a steep angle so that rain and snow would slide off of it. We can achieve this shape by taking two heavy timbers and join them in the middle with yet another mortise and tenon joint. And it's all held together with a single pin inserted through the middle. With the two pieces joined, we can raise them on top of the structure that we built. Each end will rest on the outer purlin plate of the barn. A special little groove or a bird mouth joint is cut into the roof pieces so that they can rest on top of the central purlin plates. More wooden pegs are used to secure this roof piece at each point of contact with the rest of the barn. Without these wooden pegs, the roof would just be balancing up there, and that would be a recipe for disaster. Now, of course, this model is the perfect size for us to put the roof on, but when the Mabees built their barn, someone would actually have to climb all the way up there to make sure these roof timbers went in place. Now that you've seen how one roof joist is added, we'll just go ahead and add the rest off camera. Just like that, we have our barn model complete. Now, of course, what you see is just a skeleton of a barn. No barn is really complete until it has shingles on the roof and siding on the walls. To do that, we would take long, flat boards and attach them to this skeleton using the nails that blacksmith John could make for us. This would be the only step that actually requires nails, but for a real-size barn like we have at the Mabee farm, it would take about 1,500 of those nails. Of course, the hardest part of building a barn back in the colonial period is moving the incredibly heavy pieces of wood that would make up the structure. The model we built today is perfectly manageable for 2 adult people. But when the Mabees built their barn, they would certainly have to call in some help. Probably every farmer, every neighbor that they had would come from miles around to help them build their barn. The Mabees would not pay their neighbors for this help. However, when their neighbors needed help to build a barn, the Mabees would certainly go and return the favor. In this way, they would be exchanging one service for another. But even still, there are some workloads that are just too heavy for any human being. To move the heaviest loads, the largest beams, the Mabees would probably have to use the help of their draft animals, like their oxen or horses. These powerful animals could pull ropes, which would be attached to simple pulley cranes, which could help move the largest pieces into the air. These days, most people probably wouldn't feel comfortable trying to build their own home. But in the colonial period, it wasn't just what you could do, it was pretty much what you had to do. Today, we learned the most basic techniques of a colonial builder. But who knows? Maybe this is the start of a career for you. Maybe you want to be an architect or an engineer and design structures like these. Or perhaps you want to become a woodworker or a carpenter and actually do the work with your own hands. But no matter what, whether you're building a small little model or a giant Dutch barn, you really can't beat the satisfaction you get when you complete a project of your own.